we begin in the United States, where the revelation that aides to Joe Biden discovered classified documents as they were moving boxes out of the president's Washington-based think tank offices already has had the potential to be a political headache. Now, a second batch has been found in a garage at his Delaware home. This could place him in legal jeopardy, although too little information is known about the document and why they were not stored securely at the U.S. National Archives to draw conclusions yet. There is more in the following report.
U.S. President Joe Biden's aides have found a fresh batch of classified documents at a second location in a growing political embarrassment for the White House. The matter is under review by the U.S. Department of Justice. Attorney General Merrick Garland held a press conference at the Justice Department on Thursday to announce that he has appointed a special counsel to investigate the issue.
This morning, President Biden's personal counsel called Mr. Lausch and stated that an additional document bearing classification markings was identified at the president's personal residence in Wilmington, Delaware.
State Department spokesperson Ned Price said the State Department will be leaving the investigation up to the Department of Justice.
So, Matt, there's not going to be much that I can say on a case like this for reasons that you well understand. You heard the president speak to this earlier in the week from Mexico City. Just as you heard from the president, the secretary was surprised to learn that there were any government records taken to that office. As you know, as is now well known, there is a review of this matter, and so we're going to let that review play out.
It is not yet clear when or where the additional tranche of files were found by Mr. Biden's aides. The original batch of about 10 documents was discovered in November at the Penn Biden Center, a think tank near the White House, but only came to light this week. The White House has not yet commented on the newly discovered batch. During a daily press briefing on Wednesday, Biden administration press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre declined to answer questions about the first cache of files. Ms. Jean-Pierre referred most of the questions asked to the Department of Justice, but maintained that Mr. Biden takes classified documents seriously and that his team immediately turned the documents over after the discovery.
I'm not going to get into the decisions that was made by the Attorney General. I will say this, and you've heard me say this many times before. This is a president that believes in the independence of the Justice Department. This is something that he has been saying since the campaign, and you've heard me say this over and over in restoring that independence.
Meanwhile, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has compared Mr. Biden's handling of classified documents to former U.S. President Donald Trump.
From one standpoint, they knew the documents were there. They actually asked President Trump to put another lock on, so they were locked. You look at President Biden. He wasn't president. He was vice president. He held these in different locations right out in the open. He criticized President Trump. Did he utilize the Justice Department to raid President Trump? Did you think that was right? They knew this has happened to President Biden before the election, but they kept it a secret from the American public. He goes on 60 Minutes, criticizes President Trump, even knowing what he has done, and he wasn't president at the time.
But if it drags on, it could have a more corrosive effect on his presidency. The White House has said Mr. Biden's lawyer alerted the archives as soon as they recovered the classified materials at the think tank, and the agency retrieved them the next morning. Last August, FBI agents searched the Florida home of Mr. Biden's predecessor and seized more than 10,000 files that Mr. Trump had not turned over to the National Archives.
And I have joining me on Word now to discuss this, the publisher of New Americans magazine, Deba Wajai, and a Republican, Ejike Okba. Good to have you both.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let me begin with you, Deba Wajai. I want you to speak to this latest development that new classified documents were found in President Biden's home in Delaware, on top of what we learned on Monday, I believe it was, that classified documents were found in his think tank office. How bad is this?
Yeah, it's very bad. It's not encouraging because this is something that has become a very important in the U.S. democratic system. Before now, we've been talking about President Trump, having to keep classified documents, take documents haven't taken classified documents home and kept them for too long. And then now President Biden also haven't classified documents when he was vice president. So it's not very encouraging. It's not something that is good for him, especially knowing that he will be going for a second term.
And Deba, Ejike Okpa, we had Deba Wajai there drawing a parallel between former President Trump's retention of classified documents and that now of President Trump. But we've had the White House and Democrats saying, look, there is no equivalence because in these two cases, because President Biden only, when you look at the number of documents, they're quite small compared to that which was in the custody of former President Trump. How valid is their argument?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I think some very strong distinction has to be made. Biden was not president at the time these documents were stored. Okay, so let's get that clarification. Vice presidents are not authorized by law to classify documents. It's only the president that can do that. So you might even have to be linked to Obama to say, okay, what did Obama know? That his own vice president was classifying document or was, storing a document, classified document that are now being found in his center and at his home. So let that distinction be made. As to the number of documents, nobody has counted how many that were in the boxes. They say boxes. They haven't counted it. So there's no parallel here. It's just a case of either oversight or error in judgment, because if the vice president do not classify documents, talk less about keeping them. So Trump was a president. He was never a vice president. Now, if this were to have happened after Biden served as president, it would be an equivalent. But now they are not equivalent. They are totally two different things because of who they were and what they were doing at the time.
But I'm staying with you, Ejike Okpa. When you look at the fact that President Biden himself has said he's not aware of these documents, and his lawyers are also fully cooperating, doesn't that draw a distinction between the case of former President Trump and President Biden?
Well, I mean, when you say you're not aware, the process of getting documents from the presidency or the president when they leave office, it's a process. I'm a real estate person. When George Bush was leaving office, I was one of the people that were solicited to find a warehouse where these documents have to be stored before they are released to the presidential library. So that process is clear. It's a National Archive thing. They're the ones that take control of this. And you are not even allowed to take any paper out of the White House, except, if you are going for briefing and certain things. So the question has to be asked, how did he get this document? Was he taking it with knowledge, or was somebody taking it on his behalf? I mean, of course, when things like this happen, people have to come out and say things, oh, I don't remember, I remember. I mean, yes, memory can elapse and fail any one of us. But, this is significant. I am not making any judgment on him. I just want to understand how those documents got there. Just like the case of Trump, how did it get there? But let us just draw the line that a vice president and a former president, they are two different people. The vice presidents do not classify documents, talk less of taking them. So we need to get to the bottom of it and say, how did he get there? And how come it was somebody else, an aide, that found it and reported it after the fact? How long has he been there? So he was vice president for 8 years under Obama. He left in 2017, and we are now discovering it, 5 years, 6 years after the fact? So that is significant. And we need to find out, and then whatever consequences has to come because of that conduct, then the American people will know. But don't forget, if you go back into Biden's history, even when he was in law school, there were lots, accusations about what he said. So, again, this is not to ding on his character. The guy is known to say certain things that, when facts are checked, they don't add up. So
Let
it's
me
an
put you
interesting
on
time.
hold, Mr. Ejike, but just because of time, I want to take this to Deba Wajai. Deba Wajai, you can already hear how Ejike is sounding. He's a Republican, and so it shows you perhaps how Republicans view this particular situation. We've heard from the Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, who's saying that Biden should be investigated. Could this become a political headache for President Biden during his time in office?
Yeah, definitely. While Okpa was talking, I already knew that he's a Republican. I don't belong to any political party, I'm a journalist. But the thing is that what has happened has kind of dented, the good image of President Biden. However, it is how it is being managed by those that are working with him at this time. Like, we all are seeing, he has said that when the first information came out, said he expressed surprise. And now that they've also found additional classified documents in his house this time, he has to come out.
But and I'm staying with you, Deba Wajai. He's still expressing surprise, but a special counsel has now been set up. What happens if this produces far more serious charges?
I think at the end of the day, at the end of the day, I think it will be negligence, on his part. Just the way he said that President Trump was careless. I think at the end of the day, this is what is going to amount to. I don't think it will cost, so much. I don't think it will go to the extent of, being charged for criminal negligence, but I think it will come under, Mr. Manuel, something like that.
I can't remember if he said President Trump was careless, but I remember he said he was irresponsible. But let me take it to you, Ejike Okpa, because these are two different cases in just a very short period of time. Doesn't this also speak to how classified documents are tracked in the U.S.?
But again, like I said, when you're president, every paper that crosses your desk is part of your presidential archive. You don't take it away, you don't take it in your pocket, you don't even stick it in your pocket and take it home. So once your presidency is about to end, the National Archive comes in and start to categorize those papers. And then they start to find a place where they are going to be stored before they are released to the presidential library, because usually that is where these papers end up. They end up in this a different section of the library for scholars and researchers who want to go see what it is they were writing, and they go in there, they get permission, and they get into those sections. If you come to Dallas, the Bush Presidential Library, there's a section there. I have been there. If you go, I've been to so many presidential libraries. So that is the process. But again, let the listeners and your audience just take away. There's nothing else to take away from this, that the Vice President of America, in fact, the Vice Presidents don't even have presidential libraries. It's only the President. So usually they can have a center, but if in those centers what they have has to be documents that, that is approved for them to have. Only the exclusivity of classified documents, rest on the shoulder of the president. So, again, this is not to indict, Biden, my Republican nature or my Republican leaning has nothing to do with fairness and the objectivity of looking at what has happened. And they said, okay, how do we get to the bottom of this and be able to now find out, okay, prevent it. Again, part of this is nobody's going to be indicted. Nobody's going to go to jail because of this. It's an oversight, it's an error in judgment, but we need to know how he went from Washington, D.C. to Delaware in his garage, and he's been sitting there. He's been sitting there. Who knows how long he's been sitting there? Again, would this be a case of somebody planting it in order to make Biden look look back. I don't know. But my
And
point
definitely,
is good.
there is a lot to watch out for. A special counsel has been appointed in the spirit of fairness. We will see how things play out. Sorry to have interrupted you. My time is up. Thank you so much for talking to us. Publisher, New Americans Magazine, Deba Wadiai, and the Republican, Ejikiopa.
Thank you, guys.
I always introduce you as a Republican, so because you're one. Thank you.
I like the elephant better than
Thank you,
a donkey.
gentlemen. I'm sorry I have to leave it here. Thank you, gentlemen, for talking to us.